The color of madness. Pierre, a man haunted by his inner demons, stood before the canvas, brush poised, his hand trembling slightly. The small attic studio was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the streets of Arles were quiet. The townsfolk had long since retired for the night. He gazed at the half-finished self-portrait, his own reflection staring back at him with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified him. The swirling blues of the background seemed to pulse with life, threatening to engulf the figure at the center. Pierre could feel the weight of the straw hat on his head, the rough texture of his beard, and the scratchy wool of his jacket, all vividly rendered in vibrant strokes on the canvas. As he dipped his brush into a glob of yellow paint, a memory flashed: the golden wheat fields outside the town, shimmering under the relentless Provençal sun. He had spent countless hours there, desperately trying to capture the essence of light itself. The locals had watched him warily, whispering among themselves about the strange foreign painter who talked to himself and ate yellow paint. Pierre shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand. The portrait. He needed to finish it tonight. Tomorrow was uncertain. Dr. Gachet had been making noises about another stay at the asylum, and Pierre couldn't bear the thought of those sterile white walls closing in around him again. With renewed determination, he attacked the canvas, adding highlights to his cheekbones and deepening the shadows under his eyes. Each brushstroke was a declaration of existence: I am here, I am alive, and I matter. As the night wore on, Pierre lost himself in the work. The boundaries between artist and subject blurred. Was he painting the portrait, or was the picture painting him? The eyes on the canvas seemed to follow him around the room, challenging him and urging him to dig deeper and reveal more. In a frenzy of creation, Pierre added more colors, reds and greens joining the blues and yellows in a chaotic dance across the canvas. His breath came in short gasps, his heart pounding in his chest. The room around him faded away, and he was floating in a sea of pure color and emotion. A sharp pain in his ear brought him crashing back to reality. Pierre blinked, disoriented. The candle had burned low, its flame flickering weakly. How long had he been painting? Hours? Days? He reached up to touch his ear, half expecting to find it missing. But no, it was still there, whole and intact. It's just a phantom pain, a reminder of past transgressions. He turned back to the portrait, gasping at what he saw. The face on the canvas was no longer just his own. It was every face he had ever painted, every person he had ever loved or hated or feared. It was his brother Theo, his eyes full of worry and love. It was Gauguin, passionate and volatile. It was the kind-faced postman Roulin, and the sad-eyed prostitute from the local brothel. And behind them all, woven into the very fabric of the painting, were the stars. Not the twinkling pinpricks of light he saw in the night sky, but great swirling vortexes of cosmic energy. They pulsed and wreathed, threatening to tear apart the very canvas they were painted on. But they also held a promise of transformation, of a new understanding of the world. And behind them all, woven into the very fabric of the painting, were the stars. Not the twinkling pinpricks of light he saw in the night sky, but great swirling vortexes of cosmic energy. They pulsed and wreathed, threatening to tear apart the very canvas they were painted on. Pierre stumbled backwards, knocking over his easel. The portrait clattered to the floor, face down. He stood there, breathing heavily, torn between the desire to destroy the painting and the desperate need to preserve it. A rooster crowed in the distance. The morning was coming. Pierre slowly became aware of his surroundings again: the cramped attic, the smell of turpentine and linseed oil, the ache in his muscles from hours of standing. With trembling hands, he picked up the fallen canvas. He couldn't bring himself to turn it over for a long moment, afraid of what he might see. But finally, gathering his courage, he flipped it around. It was just a portrait. A good one indeed, perhaps one of his best. But it was no longer the cosmic revelation it had seemed in the depths of the night, just a man in a hat, looking out at the viewer with tired but determined eyes. Pierre let out a long, shaky breath. He carefully propped the painting back on the easel and cleaned his brushes. As he worked, he tried to hold on to the feelings of transcendence he had experienced during the night. But they slipped away like water through his fingers, leaving behind only a vague sense of loss and a pounding headache. When Dr. Gachet arrived later that morning, he found Pierre slumped in a chair, fast asleep. The doctor tsked softly, taking in the chaos of the studio, paint-splattered floorboards, crumpled sketches, half-empty wine bottles. His eyes were drawn to the portrait on the easel. "Oh, Vincent," he murmured, using the name Pierre had abandoned years ago. "What demons drive you to create such beauty?" Pierre stirred, opening bloodshot eyes. For a moment confusion clouded his features, and then recognition dawned. "Ah, doctor. Have you come to take me away again?" Gachet smiled sadly. "I've come to check on you, old friend. How are you feeling?" Pierre considered the question, his gaze drifting to the portrait. I'm not sure. Last night I thought I had finally captured it, the truth behind everything. But now—" He trailed off, gesturing helplessly. The truth, like the inspiration that had fueled his painting, was a fleeting thing, slipping away as the first light of dawn filtered into the studio. The doctor nodded, understanding. "Perhaps that's the nature of truth, Vincent. Glimpsed in moments of madness but slipping away in the light of day." Pierre laughed bitterly. "And what good is a truth you can't hold on to?" Gachet placed a gentle hand on Pierre's shoulder. "The same good as a star you can't reach. It gives you something to strive for, a reason to keep reaching." Pierre nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the portrait, the swirling background shimmering in the soft morning light, hinting at depths beyond the paint and canvas. "Well then," he said quietly, "I suppose I'd better keep painting." As Dr. Gachet began his examination, Pierre's mind raced with ideas for his subsequent work. The demons that drove him might never be silenced, but as long as he had his brushes and colors, he could transform their howls into something beautiful.